I think I've just added a monster to my game, and at this point, even I don't want to fight him. Try to run away and he'll shoot you. Try to get in close and he'll stomp you down. Try to dodge and he'll throw you to the other side of the room. And after my 25th defeat of the day, even I want to find out how I've created this nightmare. So let's begin. To start off, I had to create a concept for this boss. He's supposed to be the end boss of this nightmare that the player is having. So he has to be scary. I also want this to be a test for players. I don't want them to be able to beat him without exploring the rest of the area first. Kind of like how Elden Ring did it with Margit. I want him to get better at the game, level up and be strong enough to face this boss. Lastly, I want him to have some kind of intelligence. Because brain dead enemies who just spam their one simple attack pattern aren't that difficult and aren't that threatening either. Okay, let's recap. He has to be scary, difficult and intelligent. Sounds like enough to go off of. Let's begin with the scary part. This starts with the art design. I wanted him to fit in with the rest of the level, so I had to take the color palette into account. Many of you will now wonder why that is important, so let's just make him purple for a second. And there you go, point proven. Whenever I want to draw a new character or object, the first thing I do is look at reference photos for inspiration. For this one, it ended up being the Godskin nobles from Elden Ring. Then I draw horrible ideas on some paper until I come up with one that I like, which I will then draw on my computer. And oh yeah, small tip, always separate body parts on layers. If you don't, you won't be able to animate him later and he'll just kinda stand there. Now that we have him looking scary, we have to increase the difficulty, because Buddy is looking pretty easy right now. So I've come up with a few different attacks and animations. The first one is your regular hit, which I just copied from the enemy devlog, which none of you watched, so please go do that. The next one is a range attack, which allows him to shoot magic balls out of his weapon spear thingy, which makes sure you can't chuck daggers at him from a distance and still win. Then I added some variations to all these simple attacks and thought I was good to go. On to intelligence. It's all good having nice attacks, but when the boss is swinging his weapon around while you're just staring him down at a distance, it's not very scary. This is where we run into a problem, because I have no idea how state machines work. Now, some of my more dedicated viewers will think, what is this guy on about? He made a state machine for his enemies. To which I would say, yes, but I just copied the code from someone else and there's a lot of issues with it, so I will not be using it again. Why, you ask? Well, there's the override for the logic. Okay. You get the point. I'd like to actually know what's going on so I can fix issues when they arise. And in my experience, they always do. So that's when I stumbled upon this video by the goat, which explained a really simple, comprehensive way to do this and made me regret my whole current enemy system. But it's totally fine. Let's begin. The state machine is basically the animator tree from Unity, where animations functions as states. The default state for my boss is the boss run state. This has the boss moving towards the player, and it is the base where all the other states connect to. For the additional logic, there are scripts attached to each of the states. To paint a clearer picture, I'll briefly explain how the first stage is set up. When the boss is running, it constantly calculates the distance between him and the player. The boss uses this to make certain decisions, like which attack to use. So now when the boss gets close enough to the player, it will fire off an animation trigger, which will then send the boss into the melee attack state. This will then return to the run state once the animation has finished playing, and then the process will start over again. Now that the states are explained, some of you may be thinking, if it just plays the animation, how does the boss actually damage the player? At first I tried fixing this issue by attaching a script to the attack state and having that do the damage to the player. But when testing this out, it felt unfair, because whenever the animation would start, the damage would be applied immediately. I'll explain why that's a bad thing. For example, at this point in a boss's swing, it shouldn't really damage yet, as he's kinda loading up his attack to hurt the player. But it still does, as the script hurts the player as soon as the attack state is active. Instead, this point here is actually a much better time frame to deliver the damage. Now technically you could use something like a coroutine and have the damage delay for a certain time, but I think I found a much better way. And this is where the boss attack script comes into play. In here I have a couple public functions, which do the actual damage to the player. And instead of it being attached to certain states, I have them attached to the boss itself. There's an attack point on the boss's weapon, which will do a circle cast looking for a collider that's on the player. If it finds this collider, it will inflict the damage. These damage functions are called from animation events. This way, I can have the damage be inflicted right when the enemy's weapon hits the player, resolving the issue. So now when I try to run away, the boss shoots me down, and when I get in close, he'll try to swing his weapon at me, and I'll get hurt just at the right time. The boss is already starting to feel a little more challenging, so now that we have the basics down, let's spice him up. To do this, I added a simple boss health script, and at somewhere around the halfway mark, the boss's eyes begin to glow, and he will start entering his second phase, throwing you against the wall. This is where I really want the player to be tested. The way I did this is I basically just added a check to the boss health script to send an animation trigger whenever his health gets down to a certain point. In the animation tree, this basically transfers the boss onto a boss run 2, where everything just goes a bit quicker. The attacks come out quicker, the boss moves quicker, he shoots more projectiles, etc. But to only speed him up a little bit would be boring. So I've added a couple new attacks. One of the new additions is the slam. Whenever you get really close to the boss, he'll charge his weapon, and when fully charged, he'll slam it to the ground, making your whole screen shake. Additionally, I added another attack, when you're sort of at a medium range. You won't just try to close the distance slowly, that would be too easy. What I'll do instead is a thrust attack, which you can't walk away from. But after testing this out, it seemed a little bit too unfair. So now I've made sure you can parry this attack, giving you a way out. Playing the boss fight seems pretty cool now. But to make a greater impact, I think it could be a little more dramatic. And after adding a million triggers, which is probably not the optimal way to do this, I think it's turned out pretty cool. Let me talk you through the scene. After exploring the map, you'll drop down into a closed tunnel, where you'll slowly hear boss music playing. You feel your heart beating, and as you see an absolute unit of a boss, you hear a door closing loudly behind you. You feel your heart beating again as the boss speaks to you, and when he's finished talking, the fight begins. But to experience the whole fight, you'll have to wait a couple of weeks before you can play it yourself. You heard that right, I'm planning on releasing a first demo in a few weeks, which will contain a small modified prologue and the first level. So if you're interested in that, or if you find this video somewhat helpful or entertaining, please interact with this post and subscribe to the channel. The support on the last video was amazing, and it gave me lots of motivation to work hard to polish my game up for a demo. But I don't want to release a demo which no one is going to play. So tell your friends, share, and let's blow this video up so it can get out to as many people as possible. As to a realistic time frame for the demo release, I'd say it's going to be about 6 to 8 weeks from now. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye!